Now that's kind of a big claim and that's kind of a big change, so I'd like to back it up a little bit and show you how we got there. First step was we invented the printing press and movable type, which we roughly see as one part of history. The impact of this was it led to things like democracy and scientific revolution. The fact that you could take information and reproduce it cheaply and quickly changed a lot of different things. It allowed you to do things like, I have a scientific finding, I'm going to write it down and send it to my colleagues so they can verify it. And that was the basis of the science as we know it today. The other big revolution after that was the ability to transmit voice over copper cables, which led to the telephone. Then we had the capability to record video as well and transport movie reels and show everybody how big this world really was and get people into the idea that there was other places than where you lived. And finally, we harnessed the electromagnetic spectrum to transmit these images and sounds. There's an odd symmetry here, though, in all these previous revolutions, in that some mediums were very good in one-to-one conversations, like the telephone. Other mediums were very good in reaching many people. But if you wanted to reach many people, you had to be a professional, you needed to have a broadcasting tower or a printing press. This was only something professionals could do if you had a lot of money. If you were a normal person, the only thing you could do was talk to one other person. That's kind of a weird symmetry there. And then this thing happened. This thing that looks like a peacock hit a windscreen is a map of the internet that was drawn somewhere in the early 2000s. It's a lot bigger, more complex now. And the internet changed all of this. The internet, if I would have to summarize it in one sentence, it's like you buy the book and they throw in a printing press for free, right? You can download a web page, show it in your browser, and then you can type something in and click publish. You instantly became a publisher. Before you had to have a printing press or a broadcasting tower. Now suddenly you're one of the many producers in the world. And that's the way that people tend to be before we had these revolutions around televisions and phones. We didn't even understand that you needed to have words for things like participation. We didn't understand psychology around group forming, because this is how people just lived. They told stories to each other, they collaborated, and now the technology has finally caught up with us. And it allows humanity to communicate and share with each other again. We're using this massively, as you could see in the amount of information that's now being generated. So we think this is important. It kind of matters, right? And like any new technology that is randomly new and exciting, we don't quite know what to do with it yet. It's a little bit like the teenage years of a technology, right? It took about 40 to 60 years for the printing press to lead to the revolution around scientific discovery, etc. And this is actually one of the very first lolcat pictures that was posted on the internet. This is what started the meme of lolcats. And it's really not such a good picture. The picture itself is kind of cute. The text above it is cute as well. This cat going, wow, I can have cheeseburger. But I wouldn't call it art. There's no craftsmanship involved in it. This isn't something that a professional produced for millions to be consumed. But I feel that that's the beauty of it, because when you look at this picture and you go, hey, that's kind of bad, you also think, I got a cat picture. I've got a sensory font. I can make these too. So anytime that you see something produced on the web by people like us, you go, hey, I can play this game too. It's an open invite for anybody to join the social web, join social media, and start publishing and sharing and collaborating and playing and doing all these interesting things with other fellow human beings. While we are in our teenage years, we do see some signs of how this is already starting to change some of the ways that the world works. For instance, this was a campaign in India. 2 years ago, 2008, there was a right-wing Hindu movement who believed that women shouldn't go out in public. They shouldn't consume alcohol, they should stay at home and take care of the children. Now you can imagine that there was a lot of women in India who didn't agree with this. It was only a very small movement who had these beliefs. But this right-wing Hindu movement said any woman that we see on Valentine's Day who's out in a pub or being on a date and not married without a husband, we're going to beat them up. We're going to terrorize you so you won't leave the house anymore. And you get married like a proper right-wing Hindu woman should. Now you can imagine there's a lot of people very upset about this. But one woman, she started a Facebook group, and it's one of my all-time favorite Facebook groups ever. It's the Consortium for Loose and Forward Pub-Going Women. It's an awesome group. And she said, this is not a good situation. We need to change this, right? We need to be able to go out there. This is something medieval. we're going to start an action. And what we're going to do is we're all going to buy pink underwear, or pink shadis, as they're called in India. We're going to put them in a box together with a letter, and we're going to send them to the president. Now, you know, there's thousands of groups for end world hunger, change the world, etc. on Facebook. They don't have a big impact because joining a group is a very cheap and easy thing to do. It's just 2 seconds to click a button and you're part of a Facebook group. So people don't take that so seriously. But when you're the president and you see truckloads of underwear arriving on your doorstep, you know something's happening, right? You know that there's people who are pissed off enough to actually go and buy underwear and put it in a box. That has an impact. People know something big is happening. And actually, after a few truckloads of underwear, the president said, this situation can't go on anymore. We need to change this. So he put a couple of new laws in place that outlawed this right-wing Hindu movement. And women were able to go to the pubs again and enjoy their Valentine's dates. Now, the interesting thing to this story for me was that there was no media involved. There was no organization. There were no professionals. There was no driving budgets and fund rallies and all this kind of stuff. It was people coming together and self-organizing themselves around an issue they felt was important. And that's very different from how things used to work. You needed to join something like UNICEF or Greenpeace or any kind of news organization to have an impact on the world. Now anybody can publish stuff on the internet and start gathering people around them and make changes in the world. So that's a big deal, I think. It does have this weird side effect, though, where you've got all these social destinations, and this is a map of the internet from XKCD, with all the different social places in there. Yeah, Google Bus is in there too in the center. And the weird thing here is that if you look at all these different places, they speak different languages and they have different cultures. Or as the more scientific people amongst us might call it, they have different protocols. Different terms of services that makes them incompatible with each other. So if somebody is on Twitter, you can't talk to people on Skype. And if you're on Skype, you can't talk to people in QQ in Vietnam, etc. So that's weird, because these are people who want to communicate with each other. They want to collaborate. They want to get to know each other. They want to discover. The situation we have now is when you buy a phone and you have to ask people, what's your T-Mobile number? Because you can't call anything other than the mobile phone network that you've bought. It's a very weird, unnatural situation. So we want to change that. So when we are designing the Google Buzz API, we said we want to take a definitive step forward in changing this landscape. So we looked at using open protocols, developing them further where possible, and where certain things weren't possible yet in open protocols, we designed new ones. One of the things that I always like to highlight is that when we say open protocols, we don't mean everybody can get to your information. I know there's sometimes some confusion around it, but with open protocols, we mean anybody can do business with these people. There's no trademarks, there's no legislation threats, there's no restrictions on them, there's no copyrights. Anybody can take this bit of technology and implement it. Also, if you have a company and you want to connect to Google Buzz, there's no contracts to sign. There's no deals to be made. So with open, we mean anything can connect to anything. It doesn't mean that your information is open, it just means that things are connectable between each other. After all, when Tim Berners-Lee started thinking about the internet, his big vision was, we want to have loosely coupled small pieces on the web. And that's kind of where we want to go with the social web as well, where you have all these different social destinations and you can connect them to each other. Then you get a fair, honest, good market landscape. So Google Buzz has never set out to be the new big social destination. We want to be just one part of this much larger social web. We want to be a very good part in that social web, of course, don't get me wrong, but we never want to be the only part. We want to be one of many. So one of the open protocols that existed already for authentication was OAuth. Now, one of the problems you often have with programs is that they ask for usernames and passwords. And the problem with asking for usernames and passwords is that most people use the same username and password on every website. So if you give one application your username and password, they could probably go to Amazon and order books. They can go to Google Health and see what's going on with your physical appearance, etc. That's not a good thing. OAuth is a way for you to authenticate a service, but only give them access to the bit of information you want to give them access to. They never know your username, they never know your password. They can never talk to anything except this thing that you explicitly told them to be able to read. The other standard that we have adopted is Atom and AtomPub. Now, Atom is pretty much one of the widest used standards next to HTTP and stuff on the web. If you have a blog, if you have a web page, you probably have an Atom feed. It transmits information like a title, a bit of content, when it was published, etc. Atom Pub took that one step further and they said, okay, we now have these web pages. Let's treat every URL as if it's a resource that you can manipulate. You can create stuff, you can delete stuff, you can update stuff, etc. Media RSS was one of the things that was available that describes how you describe images and videos in these streams. And in some cases, stuff didn't exist yet. For instance, if you want to make social real time, where you see stuff flowing in as it's being created, instead of checking every 5 minutes if some new stuff was created, that's what Pops Up Hubbub does. Now, Pops Up Hubbub is a typical example of if you get an engineer and you ask him to come up with a project name, he comes up with something really clever that's very difficult to pronounce. So we usually call it push for short. Then there's activity streams. Activity streams took the Atom spec and said, Atom is perfect for transmitting a large stream of stuff, but there's no social information in there. All we have is a blob of HTML. So we need to add information about who did something, what did they do, and what is the stuff they were doing it to. So it's an extension on the activity streams, on the Atom spec. And finally, the stuff that we're still implementing and finalizing is the Salmon specification. Again, it's a typical clever engineering name, where you ask an engineer, you've got a protocol where you allow comments to swim back upstream to the origination side. So he called it Salmon. The problem it sets out to solve is, for instance, if you have a conversation on YouTube and there's a movie there, you like it, that movie will be posted to your bus stream or friend feed or Facebook, etc. And then some of your other friends will have a conversation there as well. So now you've got two conversations. Now this can go on between lots of different websites, and you've got all these fragmented conversations everywhere. Salmon is a protocol that allows those conversations to go back to the source where you got the content from. So it allows you to unify all those conversations in one place. The other thing it tries to do is it's not just about conversations, it's also a big step forward towards, if I'm on Google Buzz and I want to app mention Ade at friend feed, that message should be able to flow to the other network and be displayed in his stream there. So it's our big step forward in trying to link all these different social destinations together. It'll be quite exciting. So all this stuff, we cover the protocols, but what does it allow you to do? If you look at the two interfaces we have currently, we've got a mobile interface and we've got an interface in Gmail. There's a number of things that it's really good at. The thing that I love about Google Buzz, if you look at Twitter, that's great for sending updates, right? If you just have 140 characters of news or a great thought or whatever, or you want to follow your favorite people, your favorite authors, your favorite scientists, it's a great way to see what they're thinking about. But it's not a platform where you do real social interaction. It's not somewhere where you have conversations and you do collaboration together and you do projects together. Facebook, on the other hand, is a great platform for connecting with your long-lost friends and classmates and family and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't lend itself to having large conversations because the UI just isn't there for it. Google Buzz is in the middle of those things. It allows you to do status updates. But the way that it's built, it's natively very good in people writing large parts of text and posting pictures in there and putting media and movies and all that stuff in there. And we see that in the way that people are using it. That if you post something on Google Buzz, it gets a lot more interaction than on any other platform. There's a lot more people replying to it, or if they think it's interesting, they do an ad mention to somebody else who wasn't following you, and that pulls them back into the conversation. So we're finding that people really are having rich, long, meaningful conversations here. And that's relatively unique. That's different from any other social platform. So talking through all the social things that you find in the platform, of course, there's a number of things that you have to do for the API as well to be able to put this in your own application. The first part is you need to be able to put comments in there. You need to be able to post something, right? You need to be able to read a stream of all the stuff that's happening around you. You want to get all these activities back. You want to be able to comment on stuff. You want to be able to like stuff. You want to be able to put in pictures and read them out again. And there's the activity streams bit. The activity streams bit is the larger description of how this stuff fits together. So before I dive into the actual API, I just wanted to run you through some of the basic concepts that are in there so you understand what to expect in the API that I'm going to be talking about. The first part that we've added to Atom is the who. Who was the person doing something? There's the what were they doing. In social context, it's very important. On a blog, you always have a bit of HTML, right? In social context, it's important that people were liking a movie, if they were writing a note, all these kind of things. Then there's the when were people doing it. I love this puzzle. I want to get one of them too, but I haven't been able to find it yet. But it's a great picture. And finally, there's context. The context in social scene is kind of important as well. If I do a Foursquare check-in, it's important what location I'm at, right? What venue I'm at. If you do something at Google Places, it should have an association as well. So a lot of activities within Google Buzz have a geocode. And some platforms even support things like a mood. This cat was obviously feeling kind of sleepy. So those are the basic concepts we based the Buzz API on. I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and go into the more technical detail of how you would use this. But before I do that, I wanted to give you a quick warning that this is what we call a Labs API. And Labs API means we're pretty happy with how the API works currently, but there might be some future changes because developers told us it would be much better if you were able to do X, Y, and Z in the API. So a Labs API gives us the freedom to make changes based on your feedback. We think it's more important to iterate in the open and build an API that's useful to you as developers, instead of building something that we call perfect and done. So with that out of the way, let's get started to the actual technical stuff that you're probably here to learn about. First, I wanted to show you a quick example of OA curl. Now, who here has heard about curl, the command line tool? That's very few people. I'm somewhat surprised. Cool. So I'll give you a quick explanation of what curl is. Curl is a command line utility, and it's a command line utility that allows you to say, fetch this web page and download it to a file. Now, that's a pretty simple utility, but if you want to do some web debugging, that's very useful, right? The downside is it doesn't work with OAuth-enabled resources. Then Twitter came along and they said, hey, we like curl, so we're going to make a tcurl. And it allows you to authenticate to Twitter and download a Twitter stream. Now, Google being as Google is, we said that's a great idea. We like that a lot. But why limit it to only one resource and one service, right? So we built an OAuth-enabled version of curl. And it allows you to talk to Twitter, to Microsoft Live, and Google Buzz as well. So what it is, it's a command line utility that allows you to log into Google Buzz from a command line and then fetch documents, resources, web resources, which in the case of an Atom Pub kind of situation, a web resource means it could be a stream, it could be a person, it could be a group, and it describes all the stuff that goes in there. So if you were to run this on your command line, you say OA curl fetch a document, and you specify one of the URL endpoints that we have in the API, for instance, activities, that's the stream of stuff that's happening. Then which is the user by which I'm fetching this, and that's @me. And @me is kind of the secret lingo that means the currently identified user, the person that's currently logged in, right? And the stuff that I want to fetch is @self, so that means the stuff I've written. Some of the other magic words that you could put in there is @consumption. And consumption means the stuff that people that I'm following have written. Those are the two main things that you probably want to fetch. So if you run that command, you get back this huge, big, honking document full of JSON stuff. Now, it's kind of difficult to show on the slide, so I decided to break it up a little bit and show you some of the highlights of the stuff that you could expect in there. So there's the basic Atom stuff, which you would expect. There's an ID, which is useful if you want to do operations on it. There's a publish date, an updated date if somebody added it, and there's a title. Next, we have likes in there. As you know, a Google Buzz post, you can like stuff. And the basic way that's returned is like this, where you just say, here's the URL where you can fetch the information about the likes. And here's a counter of how many likes this Buzz post has. And that's low on bandwidth. It's really quick, because if you have 50 Buzz posts, you would have all this information about all the people in there who like stuff. That could be several megabytes of information. So by default, we give you the short form, which is great if you're building a mobile application or if you have very limited screen space. You just want to show 4 people like this and you can click it to get all the other information. But instead of using this URL that I showed you, you could also put a question mark max likes behind it, and a number, and then it will embed all the information about who liked this into the response body. The same thing goes for replies. By default, we just show you, hey, there have been 2 replies to this buzz post, but if you say max replies equals some number in the URL, those replies will actually be embedded in this response. So if you're building a big web interface, embedding those things within a response is really quick, because you only have to make one HTTP request, right? If, on the other hand, you have a memory-restricted environment or your UI doesn't really allow you to display all this extra stuff, you can use the default response format. Next, the actor is what we in activity stream jargon call the person who did this stuff, who created this buzz post. And you've got all the bits of social information in there you need to create a social viable display of something. The funny thing with the human mind is that computers are really bad in understanding social relationships. If you know that your best friend has a horrible taste in movies, you don't want to see his movie recommendations, even though he's your friend, right? A computer will never understand that because human relationships are very complicated. It could be that the best friend of your mother or sister has a great taste in food, but a horrible taste in music. So you need something that will trigger the brain to tell it, hey, this is the person, I understand the social context. And the funny thing is that if you do a simple thing like showing a picture and a name, that's enough information for your brain to understand the social context of the information you're getting. So those are the bits that we always put in a response format for everything that has to do with people. There's the verb, what was the kind of action that happened? In this case, it's a buzz post, so the verb is posting. There's a source. A source is a string tag that tells you what application created this stuff. And there's a visibility in there. Buzz supports groups. So if somebody uses the drop-down and says, I want only my family to be able to see the stuff I'm creating, there's going to be a different group in there than just public. Public means the entire world can see it. If there's a different name in there, that means it's restricted to a certain group. And you can follow that link to get information about who is in that group and what the name is and all the other statistics around it. There can be geocoding in there. Geocoding is the context, the location. The thing that you will always find in there if there's geocoding is the geocode, which is just a raw coordinate on the Earth surface. But if Google understands where this coordinate lives, it will try to fill in a human name for it, like the place name, if it's an actual place. Like this will probably show up as the Clarion Congress Hotel and not just as coordinates. And finally, there's the stuff that actually happened. So we know who was doing it, what he was doing. Now we need the thing. Now, the thing in activity streams we call an object. So an object has a type, and it can be a node, it could be any kind of stuff that we put in these activity streams. And there's content associated with it. But sometimes you want to have more than just a bit of HTML, right? You want to put links in there, you want to put photos on it, you want to put movies on there. So we call those attachments. You have an object, and inside of the object there's attachments, an attachment array. In the case of a link, you would have the type is article, it has a title, which is the human readable name of it, and there's an href in there, which is the actual link. Likewise, if people are posting images, then you get an attachment with a type is photo. And a photo will fill in a thumbnail URL, which is a lot easier to display. It's a small little image we show on the bus stream as well. And you get a URL to the full image and some metadata around it, like does it have an alt tag, does it have a width, does it have a height, all those kind of things. Same happens if you post a video in there. You will have a thumbnail URL, you have a link to the actual video, and you have a bigger picture of the video. So you have a nice preview and you don't have to create this yourself. So that's all the basic stuff that we currently do in Buzz, but the activity stream supports a lot more verbs and object types. Currently, we only support a few of them, but as we're adding more sources to Google Buzz, this list might expand. So if you're programming an application that consumes stuff from Google Buzz, try to put some switch statements in there. Don't always assume that it's going to be a post, right? Finally, the last OA curl example, and then I'll go to the actual live coding if internet is working. Fingers crossed, they were fixing it as I started. So the nice thing with AtomPub is that it has the principle of anything that you read out of it, you can put back into it as well. So if you want to create a buzz post, it's the same activity stream format. You've got an array, it has an object, the object has a type node, and there's some content in there. And if you post that, you just created a buzz post. So that's kind of cool. It's really easy to use. Once you understand the concept of an activity stream, you understand how to put stuff back into Google Buzz and create stuff as well. Now, not everybody thinks about REST APIs. There's a lot of developers who just want to download a library and get up and running, right? And there's some exciting developments happening within Google. That previously we were using things like GData and client auth and all these terminologies that modern day web developers have never really heard about. I mean, who here has used GData? Only one. And Ade, did you like it? Oh, okay, but it's not JSON, right? Modern web developers like JSON. They like simple libraries, and they like to just get stuff that's in the format they expect it to be in, and they like to use OAuth because that's what everything on the web uses. So we're now building our APIs on a new backend system that talks all these different standard things that you would expect. It talks XML and JSON, whichever is the flavor of language that you're into. It uses OAuth. It uses RESTful URLs. It's the basic web API way of doing things. So we thought, hey, that's kind of exciting that we're moving to this new webbier way of doing things. But we shouldn't stop there. We should also provide some client libraries that will allow you to use all these different APIs from this one library. So instead of having Google Buzz libraries, we have Google API libraries. And we finished creating them in a number of languages, PHP, Python, Java, and Ruby. There's a couple of more coming out soonish in the next couple of months for C# and JavaScript. So this list is expanding, and if you feel like, hey, my favorite language is not represented, we love open source, so feel free to write one. We'll accept it. But the interesting thing you can do with these Google API libraries is that you can use them for Google Buzz, but you can also use them for Latitude and Moderator and the new Search API, the new Translate API, and there's a lot more APIs coming out in the future. So you can download this library once, and start using all these different services in your application without having to relearn how all of them use. It will make things a lot easier. I wanted to show you a quick code demo of what this would look like. And this kind of depends on the internet god. So if everybody can keep their fingers crossed, let's see what will happen if I click a link. Sorry. So one of the goals that we set out is that if you're a developer who just wants to get stuff done, you don't want to spend a lot of time on understanding it. So our personal goal is to have you up and running and productive within 60 seconds. Now, I may have overshot the goal a little bit when I was writing this PHP client library, because it's substantially less than 60 seconds. If I just download the file, yes, internet works. Whew. Thank you for keeping your fingers crossed. So I downloaded the file. I'm just going to extract it now. I'm using the command line because it's a little bit easier, but you could just double click on it, you know, it's that easy. So I've expanded it. I've got all these PHP files in here. So step 2, the documentation set is click on this link. Okay, I'll click on the link. And because I extracted it in a local host where my default web server lives, this is instantly working. This is the file we just downloaded. It's got a working demo already. So I'm going to look at... No, we don't need to translate it. I presume you can all recheck, right? I can't, but I know which button to click, so that helps. So this screen will ask you, hey, this application, example.org, is going to try to read your bus stream. It can get your friends. It can do all this stuff, but that's all the stuff it can do, right? It can't get to your Gmail, can't get to your documents. It can only do the stuff that's actually listed here. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm all right with that. And now you get to see one of the small problems within Google, and that's we have a lot of user accounts, and we have a lot of information. So we have a lot of people trying to break into our system and do nasty stuff to it. Now, that's never happened, because we have a lot of guys who are incredibly good at security. But because they're so incredibly good in security, it takes them a little while to change stuff, because you've got this big, complicated, super secure system. So when we said we want to have a different OAuth screen, they said, okay, no problem, we'll make that for you. It will be done in about 6 months. So right at the moment, the in-between stage is that you've got 2 authentication screens, but somewhere in the future, this will be just 1 screen. That will happen in the next few months as well. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead, click the OK button twice, and then we've authenticated the application. So what you can see it does now, it will read my consumption stream. Those are the people that I'm following. And it will render it on the screen in PHP. So you can see Patrick Janison, who was here today as well, talking about cloud. He's being super active. Ade, who's currently sitting in the back, has been quite active as well. Good morning. So post something prettier. Aren't there no pictures? Yeah. So this is kind of what you can expect when you're reading stuff out of Google Buzz. And the interesting thing is you could see this was much less than 60 seconds. This was up and running in 10 seconds. And that's kind of the ease of use that we're trying to go for. Step 3 would be, okay, you've seen that it works, you've downloaded the file, you got the t-shirt. Now let's try using this in our own application. So step 3 is just cut and pasting this template and going to your project. Now I've set up a project because it's not so interesting than seeing me clicking. But it's completely empty. It's just the same stuff that I've just downloaded. I'll just call this test.php. I'll paste this stuff in there that the example stuff told me to paste in there, and I'll open a file. Now, because I already went through the OAuth flow, it's just going to reuse the same token. And as you can see, what it does, it fetched the stream, the consumption stream for Chabot. And what it does in PHP code is it prints it. It says activities is, bang, here's a big dump of the native representation within PHP. So you can see all the stuff that I talked about. There's links in there, as you would expect in Atom. There's a title, there's an updated tag, there's an ID in there, and there's items attached to it. Now, items are the activities that happens. Every activity will have a title again, and all these other interesting bits that we talked about. It will have replies in there, likes, the person who did something with all the information filled in, and the object. And the object will have HTML or text in there, and that's the stuff you want to display. So what we just did is we created an application that will be able to talk to Google Buzz and create stuff, and read stuff, and get friend list, etc. Within 30 seconds. So that's how easy it is to use the Google Buzz API. And I think that's kind of exciting. This is unlike anything we've ever done before. So just to show you how you could use this in real life is, and this is going to look ugly because I'm not going to waste anybody's time by doing style sheets and that kind of stuff. But just to give you a feel of how you could use this. Oh. I'm just going to iterate for all the activities. Let's call each one of them an activity, and we want to have the activity items, because that's where all the social bits are in there, right? And we're going to say we're going to echo an activity publish date. And then we want to have something about an activity actor. Now, the nice thing about dumping variables is that you can cheat. So in this case, I want to have a name, right, of the actor. So see, the only thing I'm doing here is taking structures out of the activity, and I'm going to echo that to the screen. Oh. And apparently I'm not doing that very good. Am I not spelling correctly? Ah, that's what's happened. Trying to get property of a non-object in line 28. Is anybody background coding with me? Who can spot the error? Okay, so I'm just going to take a small step back and go here. That's the problem with live coding before you had a lot of coffee, right? Especially on stage, Murphy Law applied. So let's see, we have activities in there, we've got items. I think that's what I'm doing. Sorry? Items is an array, yeah. So I should... You're absolutely right. Because it's an array, I should be doing this. You're hired. You can help me coding all day. It'll make a lot less mistakes. You guys heard about extreme programming, right? Where you've got 2 people behind the keyboard. I like doing that with 60 of my closest friends. So we'll just save this. And now it's actually working, which is kind of the effect I was hoping for. So just forget about the typos and the errors. This is what came on screen in the beginning, right? If anybody asks, that's what happened. So after we set the user at this date, we want to show the stuff that he's just done. Now I know now that this is an array, so that's what I should be typing. There's an object. As I told you, there's always an object in an activity. And I want to have the content, because that's the stuff that we're actually writing. Don't you love my Web 2.0 layout using just BRs and standard font? But the nice thing is that after you make a few typos and you look at your dump again, you've got a basic stream running on the screen already. It's that easy to get up and running. Likewise, if you want to do list friends, you will get all the people and you can start doing stuff with them, saying, these are the members on the website that you're already friends with. Do you want to connect with them? Or you can show stuff where, hey, you've just bought a t-shirt. Do you want to post this out to your bus stream? And show an image in there, because that's a great way of driving traffic. So that's the basics of getting up and running. I showed you the PHP example, but it works the same way pretty much in every different language. Except, of course, that in Ruby you've got gems, in Python you've got App Engine and all these other different environments. So there's some language specifics, but the basic is the same. You cut and paste some code, you download a library, and you're up and running. It's really that easy. So at launch, which is a couple of months ago, we had a few partners working with us to show off some of the capabilities of the platform. And I'd like to go through some of the things that people have already been building to give you an idea of what's possible. The first one is the classic, very large company who have a messaging application. Seismic is quite famous for the Twitter interface. A lot of people like using it on Android and iPhone. For a long time, it was the most popular Twitter application out there. They added Google Bus support as well. And as you can see, it's a little bit different, because suddenly you get images and longer text and all that kind of stuff. But it works really well. And it's one of my favorite interfaces for Buzz on mobile as well. There's also people who like doing much more interesting stuff, like My Six Cents. They said the big problem right now with social media is that there's too much information. I'm following 600 people, there's a couple blogs who are posting in there, etc. I can't read so much stuff in a day. So My Six Cents is a social reader where they look at the stuff that you're reading. What are you interested in? What are you clicking? How much time are you spending on it? And they're trying to do a smart analysis on that and then say, this is kind of your profile of the stuff that you care about. So we're going to take all of your social streams and we're going to show it with the most relevant stuff on top of it. It's not really somewhere where you would create buzz posts, but just the concept of we're going to take a platform and apply new logic to it and do new interesting things. I found that to be quite inspiring. There's also the other typical hacks where a developer says, hey, you know what will be cool? I'm going to create a map where you see all these glowing dots of where people are posting buzz posts in the world. The API allows for it because we have this real-time fire hose thing. There's people who say you've got lots of information in there that you don't allow people to search on. So I'm going to build my own search engine around Google Buzz. And we like this. Like I said, we want to be just one node in a much larger web. So anytime people build something interesting on top of it, we send them a t-shirt. We like this kind of stuff. Likewise, this looks really bad. I'm going to have to take this slide out. What you would see here is people actually typing stuff, and there's an analysis on the words that they're using. We call it buzz mood. So the words that we look at to determine a mood are love and hate and want and think and believe and feel and wish. And using this real-time stream that comes out of Google Buzz using the firehose, we do an analysis on it. First of all, we show real-time updates. Anybody that says anything with love in it, we show it on the screen as the next message. And second of all, we calculate a percentage. So you can see how much do people like it. Now, you can kind of see here in the green line that a lot of people think, but the blue line is way over there. So there's a lot more love on Google Buzz at the moment than people who hate things. That's a good thing. It's a positive platform, I guess. And sometimes we do little hackathons at companies or cities. We've done some in Berlin, and we've done one in Stockholm as well. And one cool company in Stockholm is called Spotify. As Europeans, you probably use this service, right? Anyone here Spotify fan? Only 2 people, wow. So Spotify is a streaming music service. You can create a playlist, you can look for your favorite artist, and you can listen to it over the internet. You can do that on your computer, on your mobile phone, all these other different destinations. It's instead of having to download or buy MP3s, you can just listen to stuff and it's ad supported. So it's a really cool service. And they thought at the hackathon, hey, this is kind of a cool platform, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the Python client, we're going to put it on App Engine, and in 120 lines code, they build something that constantly searches for Google Buzz and says, anything with a Spotify link in it, we're going to take that out and analyze it. And this is the stuff that people are currently talking about. So this is the stuff that people are listening to at the moment. And the stuff they're working on right now is adding location to that. So you could even go as far as to say, what are people in Prague currently listening to? And you get a nice playlist that you can go through. So it's adding social discovery and social features to something which in itself isn't necessarily inherently social. I thought it was a pretty cool hack. So this slide, when I was starting to do this presentation 2 months ago, the question was, what's next? And I told people, it's up to you. We like adding features where there's a need for it, where a developer says, I've got a great idea and I wish I was able to make it, but I need this bit of extra functionality. Now, in the time frame, we already got a few of these questions, so I was able to expand this slide and say a few of the things that were next were a fire hose. And a fire hose is this real-time flow of information. Our day session starts at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. And he's going to do a deep dive in some of the more advanced features that I kind of hinted at this presentation. He's going to do a 201, as we call it, the advanced version. And so he's going to show you how to use this fire hose. But the cool thing is that it gives you every public buzz post that happens. So if you want to build something that does analysis or finding words that people are talking about, if you're interested in Prague, you can do an analysis on that. If you want to see who's most active, what people are responding to, what the current mood is, all this market analysis stuff, you need a real-time stream of stuff that's happening. So that's the fire hose. The track feature is kind of a filter on that. If you're like BMW or Coca-Cola, you want to know every time that people are talking about your brand and your product, but you don't need every public buzz post. So Track allows you to do a real-time subscription to all the information that matches this criteria, which can be a keyword, etc. There's a URL counter. Some people thought, hey, you guys have a Google Buzz button that allows you to post something to Buzz from a web page. But we want to build our own stuff, or we already have something like Shareaholic. It supports Facebook, Twitter, Google Buzz, Microsoft Live, and all these other different platforms where you can post links to. But they wanted to know how popular this link was within Google Buzz. So we built a URL counter. You just say, given this URL, which people and how many of them have talked about this URL? And we give that information back. And likewise, we also have a topic search where you say, given a brand name or a concept, let's say Prague, give me a list of all the people who are publicly speaking about Prague. So if you're building communities around interest or locations or brands or whatever, this allows you to show a great interface of, hey, these people are interested in the same stuff. So you can start doing discovery not just on social relationships, but also on the interest graph. But most importantly, this list isn't complete yet. So if you start building with the API and you feel that there's an interesting thing you would love to do, send me an email and we'll consider it. So finally, the place where you can find a lot of the stuff that I talked about, the documentation of all the REST APIs, the formats, etc., is code.google.com/API/buzz/docs. Got extensive tech documentation there. If it's not extensive enough, we also have a mailing list where you can ask questions. Myself and a lot of my colleagues are on there, so if you post a question, you'll get an answer in usually about 2 or 3 hours flat. We live in a few different time zones. And there's the libraries that can get you started. JavaScript and C# is coming, but I think this will cover most people, right? Who wear programs in a different language than these? And what do you code in? C#, so that's coming. And you? C#. And other people not in C#? Oh. In Python, okay, so that's good. You've got a library. So the C# library is coming, don't worry. People are working on it.
Does your REST API support XML or only JSON?
They support both XML and JSON. Well, it's actually Atom. Atom is like this extension on top of JSON, which defines a few structures, but it's fully XML compliant. So if you can do OAuth and you can do Atom or XML or JSON, you can code your own implementation really easily as well. So that's the end of the session. Thank you very much for sitting through it. I hope it was interesting. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So this time, if you get
services, right? But without these authentication, we cannot access them, right?
Correct. The only thing, so the question was, you have to use OAuth authentication to do something with the service. And that's correct. If you want to do interesting things, you want to be authenticated. The things that you couldn't do as an unauthenticated user are search for public bus posts and reading a stream of information. That's public as well. Non-public stuff, you first have to prove which user you are. But so reading is possible, but if you want to put stuff into it or use the advanced features.
This fire hose works without...
Correct. The fire hose, you don't have to do OAuth at all. That's just a big stream of all the public information. Cool. Any other questions? Nobody? Okay, well, thank you very much. And see you around.